craft beer is an industry like no other, because we're more than just an industry. We're a family.
Malt was founded with beer in hand to simply unite people who love craft beer.
You brewers are the lifeblood of Malt, so we want to say that we're here for you, no matter what. Cheers.
The Malt team, along with our supply partners, have been working round the clock to make sure we can provide you with the very best ingredients for top-notch brews.
Because that's what family is for, to be there through the tough times and through the good.
Some of our best memories have been made over a few pints at the pub.
We can't wait to catch up over a cold one once this is over, but we're still enjoying your beers until then.
So from the hop farms in the Pacific Northwest,
from the rolling barley fields in Germany,
and the Great Scottish Highlands here in the UK.
And the barley paddocks down under.
From the crags of Colorado.
And from your local maltsters in Australia, we'd like to say,
we're here so you can keep making your best beer. Cheers.
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 Slanjava.
cheers.
cheers!
Cheers.
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 Hello everyone, thank you to Malt for sponsoring the Good Beer Week Virtual Trade Hub. We've got our final session of the Trade Hub talking all about malt specifications, and I just want to make a mention that we've got an issue maybe with the live chat, so if you can't see the live chat, just refresh the page and hopefully it pops up. If you do have any questions as we go, feel free to drop them in there and I will relay them to my special guest, Chris Marker from Barrett Burston. Chris, how are you?
I'm sorry, Luke.
That's right. I had you muted for that bit by mistake anyway. So
Okay.
you're good. As I said, yeah, any questions, drop them in the chat. But Chris, can you just give us a quick summary of who you are and what you do?
Okay, so I'm the Technical Services Manager at Barrett Burston Malting. I've been with the company for about 25 years. As my title suggests, I look after the technical side of things at Barrett's, mainly looking after the lab and some other things as well.
Great. All right, well, let's just jump into the presentation. As I said, any questions along the way, just fire them off into the chat and I will relay them to Chris. But Chris, take it away.
Okay, thank you. So I'll start sharing my screen now. Let's get that up so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about malt specifications and the implications for brewing. I will cover 3 sections. So I'll cover the systems of analysis. So basically how we extract the wort, the significance of the individual parameters on the COA, and then lastly I'll go through how these parameters relate to each other and how they work together. So onto the systems analysis. So there's basically 3 different types of methods.
Looks all okay on our end. I'll try and diagnose that, drop that in chat, but also I can't see your screen. So if your screen share has started or not.
Yeah, it's showing it has started.
Okay, let me just double check at my end.
Do
you want to stop the screen share and start it again?
Okay, I'll do that. Okay, how are we now?
Yeah, great. We can see your screen perfectly now. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll start again. Okay, so I will be talking about the malt specifications and the implications for brewing. So I'll cover the system of analysis, the significance of the individual parameters on the COA, and how these parameters relate to each other. So basically, there's three major systems of analysis. There's the Institute of Brewing and Distilling, formerly the IOB, the European Brewing Congress, the EBC, and the American Society of Brewing Chemists. The last one, international methods. These methods have been harmonized across the three standards. So if you look at one, it'll be the same method as in the other. So most of what I'm talking about today will be EBC. The EBC method is fairly similar to the ASBC. So moving on to the actual malt analysis, as I said, the EBC is what we do in our lab. The main difference is the extraction procedure, which then gives rise to differences in wort-related assays. Both methods use 50 grams of ground malt. In the IDB, a single temperature mash at 65, using 360 mils of water on a 0.7 millimeter grind. So it's mashed for an hour and stirred every 10 minutes for about 30 seconds. EBC, to contrast, is a temperature programmed mash. We use a 0.2 millimeter gap in the mill to give a fine grind, and the stirring is continuous all the way through. When we mash the malt, it's at 45 degrees and we add 200 mils of water, and it's held at 45 degrees for half an hour. During this time, proteases are most active, converting polypeptides and peptides into amino acids. Between 60 and 65 degrees, as the temperature ramps up to 70 degrees, beta amylase splits maltose off from the non-reducing ends of the starch chains and also produces glucose and maltotriose, all three of which are fermentable sugars. The beta amylase rapidly denatures at 70 degrees, and when the mash actually reaches 70 degrees in the test, we add a further 100 mils of water, and then it's held at 70 degrees for an hour. And both of the mash regimes are cooled down to 20 degrees at the end. Now, because of these differences, the EBC extraction usually gives a higher extract color and soluble nitrogen, and also FAN and beta glucans compared to the IOB. So if you're looking at a COA, it's important to know what sort of extract regimes being used, because they'll give different numbers between the two. Speaking of COAs, this is a typical COA that you would most likely receive from Maltster. It lists all the parameters in the specification and gives you values. Some will give you a range of what the spec is, but in this case, it's just giving you a value. So going through each individual parameter, first one being malt moisture. The importance of moisture, basically buying water from the maltster is expensive. Also, moisture level is an important indicator of the malting program, and also the kilning and malt storage. High moistures, which can give rise to slack malt, mills poorly. But however, too lower moisture can give you excessive fines when grinding. So that results from the grain shattering in the mill, and this can cause issues in mortaring. Also, lower moisture helps with storage, and there's maybe some indications of flavour due to higher kilning temperatures if there's low moisture. One thing is to consider: if you receive your malt and the moisture is not as what is on the COA, you may want to ask a question as to why there's such a high moisture compared to the COA. Had the malt been stored for a long time? Is it old malt stock and things like that? Extract. Okay, so normally extract is reported as percent dry basis. The moisture is taken out as an equation to give 0% extract, 0% moisture. So the percent extract is based on 0% moisture. So that way you can standardize it between different malts. Extract as is the amount of extract available as the malt is presented to you. It's important to get a good extract, but however, not at the cost of obtaining a good brewing performance. The wort extract must contain more than just sugar. Nutrients such as free amino nitrogen are also just as important as just raw extract. Extract is also a bulk property, so it doesn't really tell us much about the composition of the wort or what you can get out of it. It'll basically gives you an indication of how much sugar is there, but not the content of what sugars are there and how much nitrogen and etc. has been extracted into the wort. Okay, so next parameter we're looking at is wort color. This is directly related to beer color. It gives the indication of the color of the beer, but it also ignores the boiling chemistry. So as you boil your wort in the mash tun, it will darken. So some brewers will prefer boiled wort color as a parameter, and this will predict the degree of darkening of the wort upon boiling in the brewing process. Color and flavor and aroma are also related to wort color and may tell us something about beer flavor as well. So normally, well, examples of that is Munich's, Vienna's, and other roasted products are usually a darker color or are darker colors, and they usually have a more intense flavor about them. Total nitrogen and total protein. These are both properties of the barley. It's dependent on the growing conditions of the barley, such as season, nitrogen content in the soil, and also the yield. A maltster can't control TN in the malting process, so barley selection is important. Generally, higher TN gives a lower extract and more enzymes. It's also higher TN will makes the malt more difficult or the barley more difficult to modify as it affects hydration of the grain. That's because the grain structure is more dense and it's harder for water to go through the grain when it's malting, so it's harder to bring those enzymes to degrade the starch wall cells, or the cells of the starch walls. The relationship between total nitrogen and protein is quite simple. There's a factor depending on what grain you're using, and that's related to the size of the protein in that grain. So for barley, the factor is 6.25 multiplied by TN to give you total protein, and for wheat, the factor is 5.7. Soluble nitrogen. Most of the soluble nitrogen compounds are formed during malting, and these include proteins, polypeptides, peptides, amino acids, nucleotides, nitrates, and some others as well. Polypeptides and proteins are important for foam formation. Amino acids such as FAN are important for yeast nutrition and also fermentation. High soluble nitrogens may give haze and color problems. Haze is usually formed with proteins combining with polyphenols. The polyphenols can be extracted out of the hops and also the malt itself, and will appear once the beer has been brewed, and is a formation. And haze formation can be a problem once the beer is in the marketplace. So you have unstable product out in trade. Soluble nitrogen also is directly related to colour and flavour. Again, soluble nitrogen is a bulk property, so it won't give you any indication of the mix of nitrogens in, or the compounds of nitrogen in the wort. So it'll just give you the total amount of soluble nitrogen. Okay, Kolbach index, or Ki, is the ratio of soluble nitrogen compounds, sorry about that, soluble nitrogen compounds to total nitrogen. In the test, there's a relatively high error, and it's also an indicator of modification of the endosperm, which is the starchy area of the grain. It won't give you an exact indication of the cell wall breakdown, but it's a guide to likely brewing problems. For example, if you had a low Ki, you potentially could have problems converting in the mash tung, runoff times could be longer, and filtration issues may appear, and foam issues. Diastatic power. So we measure diastase using vintage Kolbach units. It's a measure of starch degrading power, and diastase, di meaning two, there's two enzymes, alpha and beta amylase mainly. There are some other enzymes as well. The diastase can affect the sugar profile. So depending on how much alpha and beta amylase are in the diastatic power, can affect the amount of different sugars produced because of the different way those enzymes break down starch. Low diastase, you expect a lower extract yield, but conversely, high diastase can affect control of attenuation. So I think some brewers can have issues with high diastase malt where their stand times are very, very short, and they have issues controlling the fermentation. It's not really specific enough though for real mashing conditions. So there's questions about how well that can predict real life situations. And it can give you can infer some information around about the kilning. So a lower diastase value is related to beta amylase being broken down during kilning. So if you have a harsh kilning product, you'll most likely have lower diastase. Wort beta-glucan, again, another indicator of cell wall breakdown. It's an indicator of endosperm modification. Beta-glucans are high molecular weight aggregates that can cause problems in mashing and also beer filtration. It affects runoff times and filtration and haze. The test we use doesn't give much information on the distribution of molecular weights, or how well or how badly the glucans bind to each other. Other non-starch polysaccharides are also ignored, and it also has an effect on mouthfeel as well. DMS and DMSP, which are dimethyl sulfide, and the precursor S-methylmethylene. They're related to a smell and also a flavour in beer. The flavour is like a cooked sweet corn flavour or a cooked cabbage flavour. To get dimethyl sulfide precursor, both the total and the free DMS are measured, and the S-methylmethylene is the difference between DMS and free DMS. S-methylmethylene relates to the likelihood of DMS production in the whirlpool and fermentation, and the precursor can also produce DMS and also dimethyl sulfoxide, which then also can break down to DMS, and yeast can also reduce dimethyl sulfoxide to DMS as well. Each three of these compounds are present in the kettle and whirlpool, and how the brewery is designed, particularly in the kettle, can affect how well the brewery can vaporize these compounds out of the kettle. So it's fairly brewery specific how well it's handled. Apparent attenuation limit, or AAL, is a measure of how much ethanol can be produced from a given malt's wort. The measurement of the difference of SG as percentage of before and after forced fermentation of a wort under standard conditions using a given yeast. It gives an indication of the extent of fermentation in a brewery. So as it says there, it's a 24-hour forced fermentation with excess yeast. Free amino nitrogen, or FAN. This is an important yeast nutrient and makes up a part of the soluble nitrogen fraction in the wort. It's important in yeast growth, as the yeast actually assimilates the free amino acids into the yeast cells, and the yeast then synthesizes its own proteins from that. So low values from below 150 milligrams per litre can lead to stuck fermentation because the yeast is not getting enough nutrients and it becomes stressed. And high values can be problematic as well, because the yeast can then form higher alcohols, and also bacteria can grab hold of it as well and can lead to infection. However, a high FAN could be desirable if you're using a lot of adjunct, because the adjuncts or the sugars don't have any nitrogen in them. So a high FAN malt can provide that for instead of what the adjunct doesn't provide. So high FAN malts can be important. Friability and partially unmodified grains, or PUGs. These are a physical measurement of how well the grain crumble, and again is an indication of modification. Typical values are above 80% to 90%. Low values indicate poor or incomplete modification of malt. High values, although fully modified, can lead to grain shattering, producing fine material that will not lauter well, similar to a very low moisture, and they sort of go hand in hand together. PUGs, or partially unmodified grains, are grains that have not fully modified and indicate a portion of the endosperm has not been fully degraded during the malting process. So that extract and also is not available, and beta-glucans can be an issue as well. Whole kernels that do not crumble at all, or wholly unmodified grains, are associated with grains that do not germinate at all, and again you're losing out on extract. Screenings and retention. Screenings are grains that are less than 2.2 millimeters wide and would typically make up less than 1.5% of the total bulk of the malt. These small grains are usually higher, or are higher, in total nitrogen and provide little extract. High proportion of screenings in your malts can lead to higher colours than you may desire, and also Retention is the percent of grain greater than 2.5 millimeters in size and would typically be above 90% in malt. Having a larger fraction of retention is more desirable, as the grain's usually a lot plumper and you get more endosperm in there, so a higher potential for extract. Viscosity. This relates to how well the wort will filter and impacts on lautering in the brew house. It's proportional to the beta-glucan. Excuse me. However, there are other macromolecules that are products of cell wall breakdown can also contribute to viscosity as well. So some worts may have a very low beta-glucan but have a higher viscosity depending on the makeup of the grain. Now, coming back to the COA itself, you can group the parameters in some rough groups and to show how they relate to each other. The first, get my highlights to work. So the first group basically is made up of extract fine grind, dry basis, and the as-is basis as well, and moisture content. As I said before, a extract is measured on a as-is basis in the lab, and dry basis is a simple calculation of moisture that gives percent moisture removed from the grain. So that's a very simple relationship between the two. That is what is presented to you as is, and that's a theoretical value. So you can compare different malts of different moistures. The second group made up of total nitrogen, soluble nitrogen, and color index as the start. Ki is a measure of modification and is the ratio of soluble to total nitrogen expressed as a percentage. FAN is part of this group as well. It is also proportional to SN and will increase with Ki for a given SN. So the more modified the malt is for a particular SN value, the more FAN you'll get. As more FAN is produced, this gives more potential for Maillard reactions to proceed with starches. So color is also in this group as well. So with heat, FAN will react with sugars and produce color. A lower moisture indicates that more heat has been applied in the kiln, and that also can increase color as well. So an increase with any of those will usually see an increase with the other. The third group is diastase. Get one else to work. Diastase and AAL and moisture content. Diastase, again, is a measure of enzymes that break down starch into fermentable sugars. Usually a higher DP will coincide with a higher AAL, so it gives a higher potential for fermentability. And depending on how the malt is kilned, a lower moisture can result in the degradation of DP. So if you have a low moisture, chances are that you're going to have a low DP. An example of this is ale malts that have higher colors. They will usually have a lower DP and a lower moisture. The fourth group it's really two, index and also friability. Where did I put that? Both these are a measure of cell wall breakdown or modification. So as one increases, so does the other. However, if the malt has a high moisture, say greater than 5.5%, then friability will drop off with higher moisture. And the last group is basically, is beta-glucan and viscosity. So, as I said before, beta-glucan is directly related to viscosity. And that is the end of my talk. Thank you, Luke. Hello, Luke.
Sorry, I am muted to everyone. I'm back now. Sorry about that, Chris. I was muted to everyone.
That's okay. I was starting to get worried that my internet had dropped out then.
No, I have multiple things to unmute when I come back live, and I forget to do one, and none of them work. Chris, thank you so much for that. If anyone has any questions, I didn't see any pop up in the chat, but if anyone has any along the way, what's the best place or resource to get answers?
Or they can email me at marker@bbmalt.com.au. So marker@bbmalt.com.au.
Great. Thanks again to Chris, and thanks again to Cryer Malt and Barrett Burston. This is the final of these presentations that we're doing. If you missed any along the way, we've had 3 days of varying talks about many different subjects. So go back into our feed and check them out. And a big shout out to everyone that's I've seen that's subscribed in the last couple of hours. We'll be putting a lot more content up on the IBA channel in the coming weeks and months. And members, don't forget, there's plenty more talks under the resources page on the website, which will take you to a YouTube presentation. And they're all from BrewCon. We've got mashups and everything as well. So plenty of stuff if you're looking to further your education. That's it from us for this Good Beer Week Virtual Festival Trade Hub. Again, thanks to Cryer Malt, and thanks everyone for watching along, and thanks for Chris for wrapping us up. Cheers.
You're welcome. Bye.